Hello there, the Beach Bum Astrologer here. Not on the beach again because it's windy and there's no point recording against the wind. All you can hear is the noise of the breeze playing on the phone. So I'm sitting in my garden here, surrounded by lovely plants and buzzing bees and all the rest of it. I'll probably be attacked by a wasp in a minute, trying to sabotage this little broadcast. Very, very brief message today, and I want to talk about the George Floyd case. It's quite unusual for one event in a country to generate a global reaction, but that's the kind of world we're living at the moment. Things going viral, either literally or in other ways, culturally, racially, and all the rest. And does astrology have anything to say, at least symbolically, about what's happening? It's quite interesting that the manifestation of protest, aside from idiotic demonstrations of violence, which shouldn't be encouraged, but the one action that seems to characterize the protest is kneeling, which is in a sense a mimicry of what actually happened, which contributing to the death of George Floyd, the unfortunate man who probably was murdered by a policeman. That's yet to be tested in a court of law, but the unfortunate event was caught on camera, and we have all become witnesses for the prosecution. It's going to be very difficult for any jury to find a justification for not finding the officer concerned guilty of murder. But what's interesting is that the action that killed this man, Mr. Floyd, the kneeling into his neck by the officer, who seems to have been completely indifferent to the fact that he was being filmed, is that this action is now being imitated by people protesting against police violence, against black people, black males especially, about racism, about the whole cultural distortion that's prevalent within the police forces of the United States, and probably in other countries too, but the focus is on the United States. The thing about kneeling is that, of course, the obvious thing to say is it involves the knees, or the knee, and the knee is ruled in astrology by Saturn. So you can say that Saturn rules this action of kneeling. It's an act of supplication, but at the moment it's being used as an act of defiance. It's become part of a cause. And what's interesting, that is in the tropical Western system of astrology, Saturn, which rules both Capricorn and Aquarius, at least in the old system latterly, in the latter sense of a co-rulership with Uranus. But it's interesting that transiting Saturn at the moment is in the early degrees of Aquarius, and Aquarius is the sign of causes, of humanitarian causes in particular. I don't think you need to add the word humanitarian, but certainly it applies to what's happening with the George Floyd case and all the demonstrations that we're seeing around the world. And it's a very strange it's happenstance, I suppose, but I think it's more than that, that the planet that rules the action, in a sense, kneeling, is in the sign of causes. It's not going to stay there forever, Saturn. It will at some point go retrograde, if it hasn't already. I've forgotten actually when it goes retrograde, but it will go back into Capricorn a little later this year and spend some time in Capricorn and conjoining other planets, Jupiter again, Pluto, and some asteroids as well, who are quite relevant to this issue. I'm not going into that today. But then Saturn will go forward again around November time, I think about November time 2020, and then connect with Jupiter on the 21st of December of 2020. The relevance of this is that I think that this George Floyd case is not just going to go away. This is not just some eruption of anger. When Saturn's involved, it usually involves long-term reaction, and part of that reaction will be a determination to change the culture in the US police forces. Quite clearly people have had absolutely enough, and this is not just a rerun of previous episodes where there have been obvious abuses of black people, black men especially, at the hands of the police. Other interesting things going on at the moment on this day, is that the moon, which in mundane astrology represents the populace, is opposed by Mercury. So there is a kind of disconnect, I think, between rulership and the people. And it's also interesting to bear in mind, and I brought this up in the videos about Boris Johnson and Donald Trump, is that Mars and Neptune, the transiting planets, Mars and Neptune, are approaching each other towards a conjunction. And while that in itself doesn't mean disaster, it does demand a completely different approach to things, because Mars is directional, it's a sharp planet, whereas Neptune is a planet in another kind of dimension, requiring a different kind of action. So our leaders would be very wise to listen to astrology, to come up with original solutions, and not just go quiet the way Boris Johnson's gone quiet, or Donald Trump, who started out by threatening people with the National Guard very inappropriately, and now himself, as I speak, appears to have gone quiet as he ruminates on the best way forward, because obviously he is being focused upon as part of the problem at the moment. The kneeling people see Donald Trump as part of the problem. Anyway, that's just a few words on the subject of George Floyd. There's so much more to be said, but I think that'll do for now. Thanks for listening, and I hope you're having a lovely weekend. Goodbye.